Wouldn't you believe it? The stock market is down, 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 down. It seems like there's no end in sight. Every day is just a sharp line down to the right. We are down 5.3% on the S&P 500 year to date. We are, negative where we were when Trump started, and people are, the reasons to blame are pretty straightforward. I think, tariffs, uncertainty, on again, off again nonsense from Trump. And, the Magnificent Seven has been hurt really, really bad. My portfolio is mostly Magnificent Seven, plus a little bit of other stuff, and I'm down 20% here year to date. So what do you make of this, Yaniv? What's going on? Is it going to snap straight back as soon as Trump pulls his head in and someone tells him to stop being an idiot? Or is this the proper correction we needed to have because there was an overinflated AI hype cycle?
I don't think it's about the AI hype cycle. Actually, Chris, what we have here is there was a big Trump bump that has now gone away. So ever since Donald Trump won the election, the markets were on a tear, right? And they were actually up quite a bit. And it was a bit hard to understand given all the policies that he'd stated. But I think if people look back to the first Trump term, the idea was, well, ultimately what Trump stands for is tax cuts and good old Republican stuff that makes more money for rich people. And so all of this other bluster isn't something to take all that seriously. But nonetheless, it was weird how much the stock market ran up with Trump coming into office with all the things he was talking about. And there was this, from the first Trump term, there was this idea of taking Trump seriously, but not literally. I would say the markets, I don't know if they took him seriously, but they definitely didn't take him literally when he talked about tariffs and all the other global destabilization he was planning on doing. And I think what's happened is, he really did mean that stuff. So now people are starting to take him seriously. So if you are the stock market and you have a new regime that is authoritarian, protectionist, isolationist, that is not good for your business. So of course stock markets are going down. And the truth is, at the end of the Biden term, they were already at historic highs based on a bunch of traditional metrics, especially PE multiples. So they were already very well valued. Then Donald Trump came into office. They went up even more for no good reason. And now reality is setting in. So it's like, well, okay, if all of this is happening, this is not good for the economy. And apparently there are some leading indicators of how the US economy is doing, of US GDP. And they have very rapidly turned negative just in the last few weeks. So the markets are reacting to the fact that, well, this situation could actually be really bad for us if we end up in the middle of a trade war. And if we lose all our allies, that is not good for business.
This is not just, fascism and protectionism. This is capriciousness and randomness. There doesn't seem to be any fucking logic to what he's doing. The worst part is like the whole Canada and Mexico thing seems like it's not even connected to economics and trade wars and disparity between imports and exports there. He's talking about fentanyl and making it about like controlling the border. And so there's not even an economic component to this. It's not like there's some upside economically when it all gets resolved. He's making enemies of the allies and trying to make friends with the enemies. It really doesn't make any sense at all. I've spent weeks and weeks and just months trying to put myself in the heads of the MAGA,
Oh, you poor bastard.
tech elite.
Why would you do that to yourself?
Because incorrect information, or rather, new information can often appear incorrect, and profoundly new information can at first appear profoundly incorrect. And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, what am I missing? Maybe all of the media narratives about him being a fascist wannabe are overstated. Maybe the end of democracy is overstated. Maybe the death of meritocracy is real. Maybe the Democrats have been really holding growth back with their, vague crypto policies and their DEI bullshit. And maybe I'm just not getting it. And so I've been trying to, fit my head into this narrative and try to understand its merits, its benefits. There's no compensating for the incompetence of these people and the meanness and actually the kind of the thin-skinned and hypocrisy of it all. And they're just, I thought maybe the tariffs were a negotiating strategy. What is he negotiating? There's nothing to negotiate with Canada. Nothing. It doesn't make any fucking sense. None.
I'd like to say that Donald Trump has in fact achieved the impossible, which is to really piss off a Canadian. I've never seen Canadians so angry. A a famously even-keeled, relaxed, chilled-out people are mad as hell at Donald Trump. And there are all sorts of boycotts and things going on over there that are really hurting American business.
And, the thing that's equally maddening, and, I just have too much faith in people or in logic. Um, but is watching people like the All In podcast and other Trump supporters trying to rationalize it and explain it away and focus on other things, and try to continue to thread the needle and dance on the head of a pin. And it's just like you are just pissing away your reputations and your credibility. And it's so obvious that you're avoiding reckoning with the truth. I don't mean to pick on the All In guys, but it's just,
Oh, no, please pick on them.
well, they're just, they're tech heavy. They're friends with some of these people. They've been some of the biggest cheerleaders. And to watch Jason Calacanis, who is like the most sniveling weakling of them all, because he doesn't even seem to have strong convictions about anything. He just like pussyfoots around and sits on the fence, and he's trying to talk to David Sachs like he's bestie, and like, oh, David, tell us more about whatever. Sorry, I'm asking you the hard questions, and it's like, dude, what you're doing is so obvious, and you're just trying to suck up and stay in the club, even though you know this is bullshit, and stop pretending like you don't. And so at least to
Yeah.
David Sachs is like sells it better, and so yeah, just drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's a scary situation. But yes, I think like to try to bring this back to startups to a certain extent, Chris, it's that the economy, which looked like it was coming out of a funk, the global economy, like the inflation had gotten under control. It wasn't all sunshine and lollipops, but things were looking pretty good. And that, of course, trickles back down into the startup market. We are now dealing with a whole lot of volatility. And, I spoke to a founder recently who said, we are already feeling the impacts of Trump's policy in the US, and we're changing our growth plans and we're changing our burn plans. So that chilling effect, it can work its way down pretty quickly. And so if you're a startup founder, I'd have to say, prepare for a great deal of volatility. There was this weird honeymoon period, like I said, where people said, oh, Trump's going to get in, but he's not going to do any of the crazy shit that's going to tank the global economy that he says he's going to do. Well, now he's doing it. And so we are in a very dangerous phase for the economy. And if you're a startup founder, I would say be conservative. Be conservative with your cash. Extend your runway. Be careful and retain a bit of flexibility and the ability to respond as circumstances change.
Yeah, so 2 points on that. The first is, you said this is washing away the Trump gains, the kind of ill-gotten gains, the inexplicable gains when he won. I mean, for the S&P 500, and certainly for my portfolio, this is way deeper than that, right? We're a pullback that goes below where we were on November 5th. And so this is, he's
Only by a little bit at the moment. There's more to go.
yeah, but there's more to go. And so this is not now no longer the Trump. This is not washing away the Trump bump. This is now pricing in the Trump chaos. And so we're going to get a Trump tax on a headwind on the market. You mentioned about, being more conservative and extending your runway. Go listen to the back catalog. There's an art to this, right? So what you cannot do is raise capital and spend it frivolously, but that does not mean you shouldn't be keeping the right people around to spend capital wisely. So this is, often you see like founders just shedding staff or focusing on execution capacity. You need to keep the strategic players around because they're helping you deploy capital wisely. I just want to put that out there because, extending capital to nowhere is not the point. You need to, the point is to deploy capital wisely and make sure that you're still hitting your goals.
I agree, but I think I wanted to debate that one again because I think it's a really interesting and it's a deep point, right? I think one way of considering this is the value of the capital you have, right? I think when circumstances are difficult, your capital is in a sense more valuable to you. So while you still need to be bold, you still need to deploy it for that massive outcome. You don't just want to sort of go back into your shell. I think it does make sense to think, okay, every dollar I spend is in a sense more expensive than a dollar I would have spent in an up economy. So I need to spend it more carefully. And it's a great time to look at all your costs, right? And for a couple of reasons. One is, if you have a crisis like this, I feel that nearly every startup is doing too many things. Here's a great time to think, should we be doing fewer things? And can we cut costs by doing so? Secondly, we talk about this secular trend of AI that is really allowing startups to be more efficient with their capital, do more with fewer people, with less tooling, and so on. So use this opportunity, the urgency with which you might be wanting to pull out that sharp pencil and see if you can be leaner. I think it goes up. So don't be stupid, don't be conservative, don't slow play it, but think, can I be a leaner, meaner version of myself? Well, I would say the urgency of answering that question has gone up with the increase of chaos in the world.
Capital efficiency, ROI is everything. And so just, yeah, absolutely, So related to this, the Bitcoin strategic reserve was announced in this weird haphazard way. The main upshot of it is actually the government is not necessarily, and I say that word very precisely, it's not necessarily buying more Bitcoin. It is basically announcing a strategy to audit, collect, and hold the Bitcoin that's already confiscated, as well as look for other revenue neutral ways of potentially accumulating more. So that last part might actually involve it buying a little more somehow, but it's not exactly clear how. What is interesting about that is that also dipped the price of Bitcoin, that announcement, because it was a bit of a buy the rumor, sell the news moment. But also, I think it was a bit of a letdown because I think Bitcoin holders were feeling like the government is going to put taxpayer dollars behind buying Bitcoin, which is going to massively inflate the price of Bitcoin. And that's not so far been what the announcement is. I actually agree here with Jason Calacanis, having just thrown him under the bus. It doesn't make a lot of sense to spend taxpayer money to just be accumulating Bitcoin necessarily. It could be seen as a wealth transfer to wealthy people who have Bitcoin. There are counter arguments. People say, the government spends money or allocates its balance sheet to all sorts of strategic reserves, and there's no reason why this is anything else than that, and it should spend taxpayer dollars on that. I think given all the grifts and bullshit the Trump administration has done, I would err on the side of not letting them spend taxpayer money on anything speculative at the moment. So I think this is probably a good middle of the road announcement that just solidifies Bitcoin as being relevant, but not the US government is like pumping it for all the Bitcoin fanboys out there.
I think they actually are pumping it. And I think the take that they had on the Pivot podcast is the right one. What they're doing is not revenue neutral, right? Because what generally happens with seized assets is the government sells them, right? And therefore they get US dollars. If you remember that is actually the US currency. And that goes to general revenue. So by holding on to all this Bitcoin that have been seized, that is in fact a revenue negative thing. It reduces the total revenue of the government. And that is going to be needing to be made up in other ways. And it seems pretty insane when there's this manufactured crisis around the debt and the deficit to do things that are actually going to make it worse. And so, yeah, it might seem like this clever thing where it's like, oh, all we do is not sell the Bitcoin we already have, but that still hits revenue. And what you're doing is effectively creating a kind of a sovereign wealth fund that is concentrated in a few crypto assets that happen to be held by Donald Trump's mates and all the people who backed him. David Sachs, we'll give him another mention here. It kind of feels gross, but yeah, the sell-off happened because it wasn't as bold as it could have been. They're not actually spending government money, but it's just another one of that list of things that makes no sense. Except as a fun headline and as a grift that helps support the people who put Donald Trump in office.
I guess that's right. Technically, they're not getting US dollars revenue from these things. As someone who believes in Bitcoin and the future of digital currency, stateless, issuer-free, permissionless, trustless money, I believe Bitcoin is a very valuable, very important innovation. I think it's a fairly reasonable thing to allocate some proportion of the US mindshare, US government's machinery, to holding it, to thinking about it, to pass laws about it, and to integrate it into the global financial system. And so, yeah, okay, it's not strictly speaking revenue neutral in the sense that the US government is not getting US dollars for it, but I think that's perfectly fine. And if it goes up the way everyone expects and predicts, and the way it's been going up since its origin, the origin block, I think it'll be a net positive for the US government and therefore for taxpayers.
Those are our thoughts on the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. What do you think? Good idea or just a waste of taxpayers' money? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.